I'd like to call the work session in order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Hagman.
Present.
Councilmember Kerr. Here. Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Councilmember Parmet. Right here.
Say present.
Councilmember Parmet.
Hi.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Present.
Councilmember Thista. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. And now we have an opportunity for public comment on any item that is on the work session agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak to council? Is there anyone online? No? All right, given that, I will declare the public comment period closed. And we have a couple of presentations coming for this work session, one from FERC and the other one from the Housing Authority. And at this time, I'll invite Brianna to come forward and provide a presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us today. I'm Brianna Snow, and I'm the Executive Director at FERC, and I brought Carla.
I'm Carla Becker. I'm the Director of Strategy at FERC. There's our lovely faces.
We really are excited to be here tonight because we just wanted to have the get in front of you guys and let you know what we're doing. We work with a lot of Keystone employees and residents, and so just wanted the opportunity to come and say hi and show you our faces and let you know what we've been up to over at FERC. Yeah, we can just change the slide.
How many of you are all familiar with FERC in any way or form? Oh, okay, good. Great. It's good to see you.
Just wait, just one quick second.
We've given her a challenging one, but she's doing great. So we'll just go through, you can go to the next slide. This FERC really exists to help our population be able to stay, live, work, and play here. We open doors and unleash our community's potential. That is our mission. And we really envision a diverse and thriving community. We want everybody to be able to live here and do well and just enjoy the beautiful place that we live in. And we do that through collaboration, cultural diversity, community, contribution, and curiosity. Yeah, we just wanted to talk about essentially who you are. This is a great photo of Alicia down in the corner. She has been working for FERC for 18 years. She started as a thrift store employee and is now part of the food market team. It's really, I think what this slide really speaks to is our staff is our community. We really make sure that our staff is representative of the community. They have lived experience. They've been in the community for a long time, and they're just really trying to make it and be a part of that community. Right now, FERC staff are 60% bicultural, and 100% of our direct service staff are bilingual and bicultural, making an environment that makes clients feel really welcome. You can come in and get your needs met in a variety of different languages, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I just wanted to back up 1 second and just let folks know that the title slide is FERC is the backbone of Summit County's workforce. That's a lot of what we hear in the community. FERC was my safety net. FERC helped me. FERC saved me through a tough time, and that's why I'm still here. And so that 31 years of trusted community service is really a testament to what we do and how we have helped stabilize a lot of the community.
So our general philosophy, our values really remind people that we're all better together. We're in a really interesting time in history where everybody seems to be so busy, hustling, trying to make it, and worrying about themselves and their own family and how to survive. And so we're really really trying to aim to help remind people that we don't really operate in silos. We really are connected. We are really interdependent on one another. And it's really important to share knowledge and information about our community and available resources and how to access programs and services to everyone who lives here, because if we lift up the most vulnerable, everyone benefits. So FERC does a lot of wraparound care, skills building. We look at social equity and justice, and we really make sure that we're listening to clients about what they want and how they want it, and so that they can build on that success.
Okay. This next slide here is a really good overview of our 4 core programs. We have a peer community, which includes a parenting home visitation program. And what Alma and Acción it is Spanish-speaking peer support for men and women that don't have access to therapy services here. We also do some support groups and pro-social events. We just wrapped up a week-long football tournament with over 50 Spanish-speaking men at Rainbow Park, which was really, really cool to see. We have our community health program, which helps people apply for affordable health insurance and help them understand tax benefits and credits. We help people apply for public assistance like Medicaid and SNAP. Help people get through upcoming medical bills that they might have, and help people apply for charitable care applications if they're struggling to pay their bills. And then in our financial empowerment program, we do a lot of case management in our Housing Justice Scholarship program. We help people remain housed and build savings and do a little bit of financial coaching to get them through a tough time. We also have a Housing Justice Coalition, which is made up of folks that are living with low income and struggling to remain housed, to really give us feedback on how we can work closely together and make improvements in our community around housing. And then we also help folks out with utilities, and we have a workforce rental assistance application too. And then finally, our community food markets. We have 2 huge community food markets, and you'll see a little bit more about them later on in the presentation, that distribute fresh food out to our community. And we also have a food equity coalition that it operates very similarly to our Housing Justice Coalition, and they give us feedback about food resources in the community and really focus on strengthening the food system here. And we also have a higher level food access advisory board as well. There's a lot going on in this slide here, but I think one of the takeaways is while we say that we have 4 programs, it's really more like 25. We do a lot of different services in the community, and that's just the core operations. People always walk in the door needing one thing or another, and if we can't meet their needs, we direct them and refer them to the place that they can get their needs met.
Sorry, my ears didn't work as correctly as your voice. What is ALMA again?
ALMA is a peer support program for Spanish-speaking women where they're paired one-on-one with a mental health coach, and they get 10 visits to help them get them navigated to the mental health support that they need.
What we were finding is that a lot of Spanish speakers needed therapists, but there was none available in the community. And so this was a really low-cost way to try to prevent that need for that next step. And so we train peers to go out and meet with specifically Spanish-speaking men and women to be able to provide that mental health support. And then, of course, if they need more support, going on to a therapist or even inpatient treatment.
That's a huge program. Last year we reached almost 500 folks in that program, in those 2 programs, Alma and Acción. All right, next slide please.
I'm trying. You somehow lost the...
If you hover your arrow more near the right of the slide, it turns into you can just see how now it's a left arrow. If you move over to the right of the slide, it'll turn over.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I have something blocking the right side of my screen. So
Oh.
thank you. Oh, geez. Hang on, I got it, but close your eyes, everybody. There we go, thank you.
Okay. So this is a little bit about the folks that we work with. This is a picture of our county. As you all know, we have about 30,000 year-round residents, or 11,750 households. The average household size for a FERC family is 3. And the self-sufficiency standard here in Summit County says that a household of 3 needs to earn minimally $103,000 annually to meet all of their basic needs. However, the average income for a 3-family FERC household is only $46,000. And additionally, the federal poverty level for a household of 3 is $25,000. So you can see here that a lot of our families and our community members and neighbors are not making nearly enough to cover their basic needs here in the county.
And they're not making enough to qualify for any programming that exists for that federal poverty level. So they're just right in the middle.
And what you call that existing right in the middle or the gray area is something that is called ALICE. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Yet Employed. So that means people that are earning, these people earn more than the federal poverty level, but not enough to afford all the basics where they live. So this is data from the United Way. They did a big project about this, and they have specific data from Summit County specifically. And 37% of our residents are considered to be ALICE households, which is really sad and something that we're working to combat. Okay, go for it.
This just talks about our impact in 2024. So we have seen almost 8,000, we saw almost 8,000 people last year. We're well on our way to do the same. We see approximately about a third of the community every year. And that basically equates to 32,717 direct service deliveries provided by FERC. When you think about it, we have 30 staff, and so that is a lot of folks seeing our community members, our neighbors, our friends, and really trying to connect them to what they need.
You can go over this too if you want.
This is just a slide. I won't read everything, but this just helps you understand our impact. This is from last year. And these are the 4 programs that we were talking about before: financial empowerment, community health, food access, and peer support. That's kind of how that all plays out for that third of the community that we see. That's what that looks like. Some things to highlight: we gave out over $400,000 of financial assistance, and most of that looks like scholarships for housing, where we work with a family and we give them a small stipend every month to be able to participate in some of those coalitions. We pay them through paying part of their rent, and so that's been very successful to get them to be able to engage with us, because oftentimes they have multiple jobs, and that also helps them stay in their housing. Another great, pretty amazing stat is we gave out $5.8 million worth of food to the community, which is huge. We are able to purchase our food at a discounted rate, so we were able to push that out into the community, which is really amazing. Signed up 401 people for health insurance, and then as you can see with that peer support, which you were asking about earlier, the ALMA and Axion program, that's almost 3,000 visits that we provided.
I wanted to do a slide here that's specifically focused on the food markets, because a lot of people, when they think of FERC, think of the thrift store that used to be around and the food market. And so I really wanted to show our impact here since COVID. So you can see pre-pandemic how many visits that we saw annually. There you have that sharp uptick from 2021 to 2022, 106% increase. And then we're on track to this year, by the end of September, complete over 31,500 visits in our food market. That's 31,500 boxes of food out the door. The other cool thing about our food market that I just like to brag about a little bit is we have an online ordering platform like Instacart. So clients just pop online, they shop for all the food that they want. They get 85% fresh food options, so we don't just have rice and beans and mac and cheese and all the gross stuff that's expired. We have a lot of really good, healthy, nutritious food. And they place their order online, they stop into the food market, it takes 2 minutes to check in, their box of food is packed and they're out the door in 3 total minutes with their order. It's a really great program. So that $227 worth of food that they can get each week, they can save up to $900 each month and put that money towards other household expenses like rent, utilities, things like that to really offset their budget and to get to a stable place. Yeah.
Is there an eligibility vetting?
For the food market, to access the food market, you just need to live or work in Summit County.
As far as financial eligibility, we do not have a specific one. We do collect demographic information and everyone is very low income, fall into the very low income, but we try to make it as barrier free as possible. However, they must live and or work in Summit. All right, this is just more information about our food market. So everybody's been asking us what is going on with state and federal funding and how it's affecting us. And we're lucky that we do not actually rely on state and federal funding. We've been historically frustrated with the fact that there is so little money out there for us. But now that there are so many cuts to our state budget and federal budget, we're feeling pretty good. So it's a blessing in disguise. However, the people that we buy our food from, Food Bank of the Rockies, has been cut. And so we're going to see some impact from that and potentially have to pay more for our food that we give out. So we're waiting to see. Really, we rely on our local population to get this food out. So as you can see, we have individual donors up there, we have towns, we have some corporate and some foundations. So the vast majority of those folks are local, definitely in the state of Colorado. And so, but this program does have the biggest budget and it's the hardest to raise money for because there's no grants to purchase food. So I think as we move forward, more nonprofits will be relying on those sources that I have on the screen, and everything will get a little bit more competitive, and we'll feel the pinch. And so that's really what we're looking at right now. Basically, our food is our #1 way to combat our housing crisis in this community, because we have more bang for our buck, and we can really divert that money so that folks can pay for housing. So we're really trying to make sure that this program continues to exist at the level that it does because of its impact. This is another slide just showing a little bit of a deeper dive into our local government. We do receive a lot of support from our local governments, and this kind of lays it out. So you can see that we, in fiscal year 25, $832,880. So the programs that we are funding, there is recognition that they do help our workforce and help our community be stronger. And so we're really focusing on those most vulnerable families. All of this money goes to fill in gaps and mostly really goes to food. And so this is how we tend to work with local government.
I just want to point out that funding comes through the tobacco tax. I think it's stage 2.
Some of it does, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost all of it, doesn't it?
500,000 of that does. Yeah.
I thought it was more than that, John. I'm not. Only 500,000 and 25 is coming from the tobacco tax.
For yes. There's other recipients like the elevated. I want to call them care clinic center. It receives 250,000. And then Building Hope receives 250,000.
Okay. And then this is just a slide here that's got some of our staff members. You can see this is in front of our old Silverthorne building. We are a small but mighty team of 30 people at FERC, and we have served about 8,000 individuals, like you saw earlier. That breaks down to each FERC employee serving 267 households themselves each year. So that's just a lot of work that's happening with the small team. We really try to pride ourselves on using technology, making efficiencies, partnering with other organizations, not duplicating services, and really trying to run an organization that's as efficient as possible. And so that way we can really focus on the clients and our community members and make sure that they're getting their needs met with wraparound supports. Yeah.
Any questions?
We got one more slide.
One more slide. No, just one more slide. So we also, you may have heard, we just want to let people know that this is happening. We have fully funded the Soul Center, which is being completed right now. It's very exciting. We're going to share that building with Building Hope and be very deliberate about our collaboration so we can save some money on operations. With that said, we're moving this winter on over there. It's right by the Breckenridge Building Company, if you guys are familiar with that. And then we will have our Dillon Food Market over here over in Dillon, but we will be moving to Silverthorne eventually when we build a new satellite building over there. So it's been 31 years now of providing services to Summit County, and we're really, really excited for the trust that we're building in the community, the resiliency we're building in families, and just really wanted to take this opportunity to let you know who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and be able to answer any questions.
And if you go back one slide too, there's just a little, we'll see if it works. If you click on that word called the Soul Center, it'll work. Yay! That's obviously a few months ago, but that's some drone footage of the building progress back in March, April.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for us? Thank you for your time.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
John?
Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the awesome work y'all do. I was wondering, I had a few questions that was kind of just as we were going down. During the program overview slide, you mentioned a lot of housing assistance work, and it seemed like there was several programs related to that. For us in particular in Keystone and kind of across the county, Bell Resorts is the largest housing provider for what I would call underrepresented communities. Do you partner with them at all, or do you have any kind of working relationship to support that massive amount of workforce that might not have other avenues to get support or services?
Yeah, so just because we work with the workforce, we absolutely work with Bell Resorts employees and Bell Resorts as an employer. Specifically for that housing, we do have a program called Workforce Rental Assistance. And what happens is if they are living in Vail Resorts owned property, Vail Resorts will actually pay that rent if there is an emergency. And so we work with them to kind of bounce that back to them. We do the vetting and the application process, and then yes, we work directly with them.
Awesome, thank you. And then also was wondering for the food market, it sounds like, and I'm no expert in food markets, right? But it sounds like you buy the food from the Food Bank of the Rockies at a significantly discounted rate, and then you talked about the funding issue and potential for increasing costs there. But are there any community partners, and I'm just thinking our large grocery chains, that provide any donations or in-kind support?
Yeah, so we work with Cafe Food Rescue, which is another nonprofit in the community. And what they do is go around and, just what the name says, rescue food. They actually work with the Keystone Conference Center a fair amount, rescuing leftover conference food. And then all the grocery stores, gas stations, Starbucks, Einstein Bagels, that kind of thing. And then they take it to the food banks and then they get distributed. And we're one of those recipients of the food market. So while we don't do that ourselves, we absolutely try to rescue and then put out any food. We have a pretty tight-knit community of food providers, including the faith-based communities. to make sure that no food goes to waste. So if we get a bunch of a product and we're not gonna be open, we try to get it to a community dinner or to a church food bank that's open on the weekend, that kind of thing.
Gotcha, awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more, sorry, Kara. So I think at the end you had mentioned moving the Dillon Food Market to Silverthorne, is that correct?
Yes.
Was there any review or look into the impact or limiting participation that Dillon or Keystone participants might have with that relocation? And I mostly am thinking about the folks that rely on public transportation.
Yeah, so I think we know that it's going to be a struggle for Keystone residents, which is why we've historically partnered with Vail Resorts. Even getting to Dillon is difficult for especially those folks on J1s. It's just really hard when you don't have a vehicle to get down there. It is going to be on the bus route. However, we continuously work with Vail Resorts to see if they can offer some sort of food at the location that all the folks live in. We just do not have the funding to open multiple sites. 2 is a stretch for us. The reason why we're moving from Dillon to Keystone is we have a very large and efficient building. It was a daycare center for a long time, falling apart, and it was our thrift store. And now we have food in it, and we just don't, it's just honestly falling apart. And so we have a deal with Silverthorne essentially to build us a building. And so it will be a little bit more efficient, cost effective, and save us money in the long run so that we can serve more people. But we're going to continuously work with those communities that need it, and Keystone being a huge, they definitely rely on our food bank.
Mm-hmm.
And so there would be the opportunity potentially if the right partnerships are put in place to have a food bank in our community that supports our employees, either on site at some kind of building or at a Vail Resort facility.
Yeah, so it would really be driven by Vail Resorts, but they have tried certain things that just haven't caught on, but they've had food pantries in the past, food markets, food banks, and then also community dinners, that kind of thing. And I think that, we're in constant communication with them, and when this happens, which it won't happen for a while, to be quite frank, we'll be in Dillon for a while longer, but it is already a problem. It already is an issue for folks that work at Keystone to get down there, and usually they're working a lot and working odd hours. So we recognize it's a problem and are continuously advocating for those folks to Vail Resorts.
I have something.
Thank you.
The one thing I will add to that is there are a couple other smaller food pantries in Dillon that will remain there, like Dillon Community Church, of course. And Lord of the Mountains has some day services as well. And then when we build this satellite food market location in Silverthorne, it's going to be really high tech. We're thinking think Amazon lockers that are refrigerated and a door code. So that way there's a little bit more access for people to get there at odd hours of the night and not just during a 9 to 5 staff hour. So we're hoping that even though the location might switch, that there'll be more flexibility because we'll have a little bit more technology rooms.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Do you know the location that you're going to be at in Silverthorne?
We do not know exactly yet. It's the parameters that it needs to be on a bus route. We're hoping it's near the transfer station, but yes, that's part of the MOU is it has to be on the bus route.
Okay, 2 more. Quickie how big is your volunteer program?
We have about 300 volunteers, so pretty robust. Some people come once, and some people come every day of the summer, and then some people come once a month. So it's a really, a lot of people volunteer their time in the food market, and then we'll be opening up the thrift store when we move to the Soul Center, so that volunteer count will actually increase.
Yes, it will. Third question's trickier, and you don't actually have to answer it, but I was wondering how often do you or your board, I think you have a board, right? Okay, decide to shift funds among programs as...
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So we are primarily grant funded, and so we write specific foundations or state agencies for grants, and those grants have to stay within the program. So we would love it if we had a pile of unrestricted dollars that we could just push over to what is the need that day, week, month, year. However, it doesn't quite work like that. That slide with the town and county support, we have just a few of those types of support that are just open to do just that. Most are really restricted and tied to certain programs. And so that's where that unrestricted funding is so incredibly important, because we would love to do that. And it just is not possible. Anytime it is, we absolutely have a very engaged board, and we try to make decisions based upon what the community is telling us. We talked about the Food Equity Coalition and the Housing Justice Coalition, and those folks help us understand what is actually happening every day in their community and what they're facing. And so we do try to do that whenever possible, but it's not as easy as one would think.
Thank you, very helpful.
Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Your program, I've been aware of your program for a long time now, and particularly the struggles that you went through with COVID. And you did some remarkable things during that period, supporting this community and trying to make your services available to the folks, as John was talking about, in the community as well. So again, we appreciate the work you do with the community.
Thank you. I do remember when the entire community was shut down and nobody was on the roads, and it was a very uncertain time. I did meet several of your residents in parking lots to take checks back to the food bank. They would call me and lay the check on the car and grab it. So it's been really great working with your residents and your community members as well. Yes, they come and visit and need, and then there's others that are able to give, and so it's really great. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. Now we have the Summit County Housing Authority. This must be Corey.
Yes.
I I've heard your name. I've even corresponded with you via email.
Yes.
But we've never met, so again, welcome to Keystone.
Thank you. Sorry, just want to make sure I get that. So I've got a name.
Yeah, one more thing. You should be good to go. Here, I'll share my screen.
Do you need me to stop and reach here?
No, it's me. We're going to switch it to Maddie. Sorry about that. We almost were there, and then my screen froze.
We just go with the speaker, if it was working or not. I think.
Yeah. We just gotta get Teams rebooted.
No, we both got frozen. Maddie, should I leave the meeting?
No, because you're the one recording.
It hurts to not do this.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
It's almost reloaded. Yeah, don't change anything on the TV. I just turned off your parents for a second.
Can you close down the recording?
I'll try to move slides a little before I need them, a little bit of delay. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, staff. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Corey Burr with the Southern County Housing Authority. And I have been kind of going around to all the councils throughout the county and the OCC to just talk about what we're doing and what has changed. And obviously, this is completely new for this group, since this group is new. So this is kind of a variation of a presentation that I've been doing with the different town councils. It was very nice to have updated for 2025 because we have a lot of 2024 data already. So I know that you received the presentation prior to, so I won't read everything, but I will touch on the key points, and please stop and ask some questions at any time. It's always good to know where SCHA came from. Actually, the original IGA that started the housing authority was between Summit County and Summit County government and the town of Silverthorne, and that was in 2002. And then what we know today as the housing authority has really changed when we did 5A, when we passed the ballot in the county and had a designated funding source for workforce housing. The big key on this one is that the purpose of the housing authority and the 5A funds that was in the original IGA is still present today. So that is that we plan, finance, acquire, construct, reconstruct, and repair, maintain, manage, and operate housing projects for programs for families for low to moderate income for employees located in Summit County. So that is what we do. And if we ever question a project, we go back to that. There are different iterations of this as far as making sure it's, because this does say for employees located in Summit County, that has been taken a step further to be for businesses that are also operating in Summit County. And then this is, I'll give it a second, sorry. This is just a timeline. I'm just kind of a visual person, so this helps me. And that starts in 2002 with that original IGA and shows those big milestones, including the most recent in 2024, where we amended the IGA to add the town of Keystone to the Housing Authority Board. But it is important to know the funding sources. So in 2006, that was when the 5A ballot was first passed, which created that 0.125 tax plus the impact fee that can be up to $2 a square foot collected by the town. And then in 2007 was a very minor amendment that, in 2006 is also when the rest of the group came on board. So Breckenridge, Dillon, and Frisco joined the IGA. And then in 2007, the town of Montezuma. And then in 2016, there was an amendment to the IGA, but the big thing for that was just to add what we passed in 2016, which was the housing tax. It was in In 2016, it was considered an emergency situation with housing. I don't think we've ever really come out of that, but we passed a housing tax that was 0.6. So we now collect 0.725 on our sales tax, and that gets dispersed back to the towns where it was collected in. And then in 2021, about 5 years before the initial IG or the initial 5A was going to expire, that went back to sorry, I had that wrong. In 2016, we extended the 0.125 tax, so that is in perpetuity. And then in 2021, the 0.6 tax was extended to 2046. So to take all those numbers and put them in perspective, we have really good funding until 2046. Sometime between 2046, between now and 2046, we will have to figure out if we need that tax or if we need additional tax measures. But at this point, that is what we have. And then in 2024, we amended to have the IGA that we know today that has the town of Keystone added.
What can the 0.6 sales tax be used for?
Same thing. So it had the same language that 5A initially had. So a lot of people think it's an extension of 5A. It was just called the housing tax because it needed a different name. But it has the same guidelines as what I originally said. And then I usually do get this question, so I put it in here, is how that money looks. Where does it go? So this actually is just 2024, because as you guys know, sales tax is 2 months in arrears, so we just finished 2024 full year of sales tax received in February. So this is what 2024 looked like. Obviously, you can tell where the big sales taxes are with Town of Breckenridge, and then it goes down from there. And at the very end, you see what was retained in 2024 at the Housing Authority for operations. And then this slide is really the community side of what we do. We do a lot, but we have kind of buckets that we fulfill, and this is really for the community. We do all the application management for deed restricted sales, also some rentals. We do annual deed monitoring. We've switched that up a little bit now. It's called annual surveys because of the new software program we have, which is making sure that every deed restricted property is in compliance. Resale calculations, that is anytime someone wants to know if they have an appreciation capped property, if they want to know what the max resale value is, that comes through us. This is what we do on most days is answer a lot of questions about people's covenants. We probably have 100 different variations of restrictive covenants in Summit County, so it's difficult to know all of them, but a lot of people have questions about them, and we certainly welcome that because the biggest thing we can do is help people understand what the restriction is for their property. And then down payment assistance, when interest rates were on the lower side, nice time that we can all remember about, the down payment assistance program was hard to use at all. We didn't do any down payment assistance loans for about 18 months. Last year, we changed the program and put in a pilot program. To use that fund, we increased the amount somebody could use, and we made the program a lot more streamlined. So we took out some of the barriers, which were steps of AMI and things like that. We made it $40,000 that people could use as a max, and we made it a 2% loan, and we capped it at 160% AMI. We also added in a maintenance kind of rehabilitation type of program, because as you guys probably know, the deed restricted properties are aging, and it can be difficult for people to afford larger things like a roof or painting or new siding or things like that. So that, for the last year, we've been using that fund. It's called the Summer Revolving Loan Fund. It was created with 5A. We've been using that fund for both down payment assistance and for this rehab component. And we've done probably, we have a full recap for the board in July, but I think probably 15 loans in the last 12 months, which is crazy after we didn't do any for about 18 months. So a pilot program. And then obviously the main things that we do for each of the jurisdictions is the deed monitoring. And then the application management has changed quite a bit with our new software program. We put in a new database, housing management program last year in the summer, so just about a year ago, where we switched things when a new property came about, even if it was for a lottery, people had to fill out an entire application and supply all of their information with that just to get into the lottery. So you have 50 people doing this huge application that needs to be evaluated by the staff. It takes a lot of time for people to upload all those documents. So now what we do, and then they be vetted, and then we run the lottery and one person wins. And you have 49 people that felt like they wasted a lot of time. So we were seeing declines in people applying for the lottery. Everything was still being sold. That didn't affect it, but we knew that there was a problem with that. So with this new software that we have, there's a pre-screen that people fill out in order to get entered into the lottery. It's a very simple pre-screen. It takes probably 5 to 6 minutes at the most if you're reading every single part of it. And that it's just a Q&A. It's just answering questions. There's no uploads. That puts you into the lottery. And so now we've seen our numbers skyrocket with over 100 people normally for each property that goes for sale. Then when we move to the application process, it's really just the top 3 to 5 people that we bring in. The other great thing about this new software is that it saves that content. So if they then win another lottery and they're higher up and they filled everything out, they can just update things like their paychecks because those have to be current, or if we switched over a tax year, things like that. So it's much easier for the community. And then the other thing is lottery management. I don't think anything. West Hills is all lottery at this point for Keystone property. We've done a lot of this in the last 6 months. Okay, so this is a beautiful picture that we received from the town of Keystone. It's actually in our lobby at our office. So in the fall of 2023, the board and several housing staff members came together to figure out what they wanted the housing authority to be. What kind of services to supply, what kind of leadership, what kind of direction. At that time, I had no idea I would be in this position, but I was part of those meetings, which has proven to be a great situation for me because I heard it directly from everybody that was involved in the discussions. And so these were the primary goals that came out. We kind of put them into these different areas so that we could track them over time. There's probably an 8 or 9 page document that lives behind these 5 buckets that we can address kind of every 6 months and look to see what have we accomplished, what are we still waiting to do, what have we started, all of that. So the biggest one is that first one, is that the board and the staff really wanted the housing authority to be the main place that people would go to for all questions for workforce housing. That's a big task because we have housing teams at every single jurisdiction. But we've worked really hard in the last year to get towards this goal. I think it's probably about a 2-year process to get people to understand where we are, what we do, what they can come to see us for. A big part of that was changing our website, making it more user-friendly so people could get content on their own. And then some of these things we've already done as far as expanding the SRLF program, which is the loan program, and then being more community-focused. We moved last year, which I have a slide on that, down to Main Street in Frisco, which has been fantastic. We compared how many people visited the previous 12 months to the 12 months that we've been in that property, and we had 100 more people come to our office in those last 12 months. So that's a huge testament to the board taking a chance and putting us into a new location. We bought that space, so we own it and we can control it. Database software program we talked about. We are working towards a universal deed restriction, and I don't want anyone that to be something that causes concern. It's not saying that the housing authority will dictate what your property needs to be or what a deed restriction is going to be. So if you have a private developer that comes to Keystone and says, I have, give me this property and I want to put a deed restriction on it, you still have that capability to negotiate everything. This is really just having universal language that gets approved by each town so that if it's going to be income restricted, we're all using the same language for that income restriction. But you still set the parameters in place for what your AMI is, and are you income testing, are you talking about assets, things like that. Hopefully in the future it's going to make it easier. I have learned that in probably 2007, 2008, there was a lot of work done to try to get to this point. but nobody was ready for it. A lot has changed since then, so we're hoping that this is the right time for that. Housing Task Force is a fantastic group. We did start this last year. So we've been meeting, so I think our first meeting was September of last year. We meet just about every month. This is housing staff. This is not, we don't have town managers, we don't have elected officials. It's really the staff that are in the depths of doing that work, and we get down into the detailed kind of things. We had to do a lot of work around the lottery and how we were going to manage the lottery and what the rules were and kind of get everybody to agree on that. So the work being done there is fantastic, and we report back to the board on that. And then operations, this was all me, and this is all areas when I came on board, we had an issue with our HUD certification. I'm happy that that is over and done with. We use the HUD certification to do our classes and also do kind of one-on-one counseling, which would involve budgeting and housing and kind of preparing somebody to buy a property. And then still working on my 5-year budget pro forma. It was a lot to get 1 year when I started. So, and then this is a space when it comes up. I think a couple of you have been to our new space. I say new, we've been there a year now. It's where the Summit Daily used to be, the west end of Main Street, and that's why this picture, the one all the way over on the side, on the left side has the Summit Daily signs on it. But the before photo is so great because when we bought the space, I think the Summit Daily had an invitation for dogs to come, so we did have to replace all of the flooring and actually paint the walls. You know, it's great that they did that, but it didn't work as well for us. But you can see that transition between that bottom one and then actually the one with all the people in it. That's actually one of our homebuyer classes. It was once we moved into the space, we had the opportunity to set all of our own schedules for those classes and not have to navigate space at the county commons building, which is very heavily used. And so we had our first Saturday class and it was 100% full. So it was great to have that picture. This slide is more, this will come up for any of you once you get into that point of having to prepare a covenant. This is the work that's going into a universal deed restriction. These are all the things that an entity needs to pay attention to or think about or discuss, consider when looking at a new deed restriction, a new restrictive covenant. And you know, it's a pretty big list, but these are the things that we care about at the Housing Authority to make sure we're meeting all of those things. They may not be in every covenant, but at least we know that they've been discussed, and that's what the universal deed restriction will do. And it's all with that goal. The deed restriction should always match the goal of the project. So if you're trying to build something for a specific income level, or you're trying to build something that has more flexibility or has you worry about assets to make sure that you get the right people in there. Those are all the things that come into play when you're talking about a new project. And this is where we would help a lot. Yes.
So just for clarity, you're trying to come up with a universally formatted.
Correct.
Okay, so that it's easy to understand because there's so many different formats to meet those different, or
exactly.
tools to meet the goals.
Yeah, there's some kind of commonality with section headings and section numbers and things like that that has already been done, and we see that, but it's of course not across all of those. But to have something from here going forward that you could take and say, oh, we don't want assets, cross that out. But here's everything that's been approved by each town, by attorneys, so it's the right language to get to where we want to do. So you'd be able to cut and paste that document.
Gotcha. So and make sure nobody misses a consideration and that it's easy to read and understand.
Exactly.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, you hate to have, yes, of course. You'd hate to have a restrictive covenant that didn't address foreclosure. That's not, I don't think that's even on my list, but that's a big thing to make sure that's in your covenant. What happens if that property goes into foreclosure? Does it stay deed restricted? Does it not? And we've learned if they're silent, that makes it really complicated. So a lot of people ask why the 2 to 3%. A lot of appreciation capped properties are around that are either 2 or 3%. There's some variation there, but not a lot. I had to update this to include 2025 numbers. We were at 2.93 when we had the 2024 numbers, but as you guys have, I'm sure, seen, we have seen a 30% increase in AMI in the last 3 years, which has been that huge big spike. So we've always said that the average change in AMI over time, this is now 26 years, is 2 to 3%. That has been correct up until this year. We actually bumped over the 3%. So it's the first time we've had that. I think all of us are somewhat hoping it levels out. I thought it would this year, but it hasn't. So now we're at 3.17, close enough to 3, but it's interesting to follow this and understand where those numbers are and why we get to an appreciation that makes sense and matches what we're seeing in AMI changes. Yes?
If your goal is to make it approximate AMI, why didn't you make it track AMI instead of fixing it at a given value?
Sorry, what was that?
Why don't you just track appreciation to AMI?
Appreciation of market rate, or?
You are doing appreciation that's based on the changes in income, right?
Yeah,
Why
so.
not just fix the rates to that?
So when the first 3% deed restriction came about, they had to figure out how they would cap it. And some have different ones than that. But they looked at AMI to see what they were seeing changes in income in order to be able to afford those. That matched that 2 to 3%. So properties that were lower priced ended up with a 2% appreciation cap. A little bit higher priced were assessed at 3%. Does that answer your question? So it's not necessarily tied to income. It is, because everything we do is, but that's the basis of where we start. But when we look at that average change in AMI, that's pretty much where that 3% appreciation came from. And that, just to be clear, that's how much the property can appreciate each year as you own it.
I understand that. I think the purpose you're trying to achieve here is to keep the property affordable in the future for sales, as opposed to thinking about owners' ability to treat it as long-term investment,
Yep.
apart from stable income. But I guess my question is, when you choose those fixed values, if we were to undergo an economic situation that caused much more drastic changes, up or down, it seems like you might depart from your goal by being in that fixed number.
You know, it's interesting. I think when we look at appreciation, that's always a question, is how do you build equity versus how do you keep it affordable? And that is something that the council looks at when we're looking at a new property. And what we are seeing with resale calculations that don't have a fixed appreciation, we're seeing those numbers go up exponentially. There are a few large neighborhoods in Summit County that are tied to change in AMI. So they just saw a 30% increase in the last 3 years. Those properties are becoming unattainable at this point. So we actually have really good examples of how not to do it.
Thank you for your explanation.
Yeah.
One of the issues with the rise in AMI that we've seen, particularly in rental units now, in Keystone, particularly in West Hills. When West Hills was built, a 2-bedroom apartment based on the AMI was projected to be about $1,200 a month. 5 years later, that same apartment is going for $2,100, $2,200, $2,300 a month, plus utilities, plus parking. Those sort of things were added on by the developer, which weren't really considered. So for people who are in the unit, the average income has gone up, but maybe their income hasn't gone up. So all of a sudden, they may be priced out of the unit just because the landlord can suddenly have a 20% or 15 or 20% increase in rental costs. Is there a way to try to address that?
It's a great question. And it's completely true. We've been having lots of conversations. You know, the rent element of the AMI that's published actually by CHAPA. HUD really just puts out the income AMI. But HUD says that the affordability factor is up to 30%. So nobody should be spending more than 30% of their income on housing. We know that's not true here. It's not happening. And so there is an argument of, is 30% accurate for Summit County? I would say no. I think that 30% should be less. I think we should be saying 25% is more in the realm of a max. The hard part is we have so many programs that are tied to SHAFA, and SHAFA has owned about 30%, and at this point they haven't changed that. It is really difficult. I think AMI is a hard thing to tie rent and income to because it is not the best measure, but it's our only measure. It's the only thing we have to go by. There are some communities in Colorado, like Snowmass, that don't use AMI at all. They go a totally different route. They have 300 properties in their realm, and we have almost 1,800. So it's really difficult. But as far as the current situation with having rents go up based on AMI, the only way to control that is on the front end of those development agreements and your management agreements. Obviously, we've seen a lot of shifting in Summit County with private entities owning workforce housing, and that's where we're seeing that biggest jump. And I think now we know. It's a hard lesson to learn because it's going to be that way for a long time. But if a new rental property comes your way, you would know to have it looked at something different.
So we have the opportunity, if we had another project come on, whether like a Wintergreen, we have the opportunity up front to negotiate with that developer to set up a whole different framework for renting.
You do. You absolutely have that. The hard part of that negotiation is the funding. So they're going to go after funding that has ties to it, and that's what's happened to most of the ones here in Summit County. They were funded with some dollars that dictated what that was going to be. And it's, the easiest thing is if you build it, you own it, right? You have somebody to manage it, and then you dictate that. We have lots of examples of those in Summit County. That's the best method. It's a really expensive method. So it's a delicate balance of how much money the town has versus what your private developer might need. I thought this was interesting listening to Brianne's presentation and FERC's presentation because we do the same thing in housing. So who lives in workforce housing? And this number has actually gone up since I initially did this presentation. So now that single family home is at 2.5 million, so it's gone up $500 million a year. Might see that shift. We've seen a lot of volatility in real estate, so we'll see. We watch that every month. But in order to afford a $2 million home, a person would need to make over $450,000 to purchase that, which we don't have a lot of jobs that pay that high of an income. So even with our big commitment to workforce housing, some of our deed-restricted homes are in that 800 to 1.6 million. Well, I haven't seen anything higher than 1.6 million. That happened to be a mostly market rate, what Frisco calls market rate, home in peak one at kind of the height of the market. That property still has a work requirement though, so it is deed restricted. So that's the highest I've seen so far. But obviously we have Staples Village and Breckenridge that's now selling it initial at 800,000.
So while I love the programs that SCHA is like, the goal is, right, I still think back to that initial slide where we talked about like mission and supporting, I believe it was low and moderate income households. I struggle, and I know this isn't you, right, but I struggle to believe that 250 to 350,000, and I know that's an example of the ends of the spectrum, is a low or moderate household. And so I guess like how do you try to balance that? Like what's the approach to that?
It's interesting because there's been no formal definition of low to moderate income. That's how it was stated in the initial documents, and it has remained. There's a lot of people that think we tap out at about 160 to 180% AMI when we cross over that line of being above moderate. We are seeing incomes increasing in Summit County. We have seen the downside of that is that they don't qualify for income restricted properties, and we see a lot of that. There's not a lot of leeway in there to have somebody go over. So that's something to think about when you have any properties too. But we are seeing people be able to afford the properties that are coming for sale. We haven't yet had a property that came up for sale that somebody wasn't there to buy. And usually 50 or more people are ready to buy that. Those properties that are higher going through private sales, they're not through lottery. Aaron, did you have a question?
I think I was just following on that last on-point comment, which is, yeah, that range, the 250 to 350, like I'm just trying to think what what jobs a couple would have to have in this county to reach that, and it's not what you're, you know, that's not middle management, that's not even upper management, it could be like 2 directors or executives to approach that.
Yeah. We do have a high rate of self-employed people in Summit County, and some of them are doing quite well. So business owners, it's interesting because I think I have it on here that it used to be deed restricted was for our service workers, you know, it was for an average person that was here in Summit County working 1, 2 jobs, whatever. That has drastically changed. We are seeing the doctors, the lawyers, the high paid RNs, even some of the higher level teachers buying into deed restriction that is just expensive.
Sure, but 2 high-paid RNs aren't going to hit that rate.
Right.
And I don't know that that if you're looking at entrepreneurs who are pulling in that number, I mean, is do you want to classify that as middle income? Is my question. Philosophically, as you make your goals.
Yeah, and I think, and this is the higher end of the spectrum, the majority of the properties we have in Summit County are, even if you just look at single family homes, we're in that 400 to 700 price range, not as many in that 800 to 1.6 million. So that is not our focus. I do think over the course of the next year, we might see more discussions at the SHA board level of defining actually low to moderate income, and that some of these are going over the top. But again, they're already in place. So it's very difficult to change a deed restriction once it's in place. So especially ones that don't have a cap on, and that 1.6 million can sell for whatever they find a buyer for. So that's an argument of, is that still affordable? Does that meet our local workforce? But that is, the person that bought it is a physician and wanted a family place and wanted 1.6 million instead of 2.5.
And so if deed restricted housing is shifting from a seasonal workforce being able to afford it more towards higher paid professionals, executives, doctors, etc., where are those seasonal workforce people supposed to
We still have it, and I don't want this slide to make anybody think that that's not the bigger part of this was just to show really what happens when you have, like, our market rate is now way superseding deed restriction. We used to see about a 30% difference, now we're seeing a 200 to 300% difference. That's new, you know, that's not something we had in 2018. So we still have the majority of your Smith Ranch properties, your West Hills, your Dillon Valley Vistas, you know, the neighborhoods that we see bigger resales, those are still in the affordable range. It does show, like, so in 2025, 100% floor person A9, which is what is used kind of the baseline for most, and we went to 133,000. That is a household income. So when you can compare that to 250 to 350,000, big difference. So that's where we sort of start. But that's somebody affording a house that's $475,000. So that's hard to find. It's impossible to find in market rate in Summit County. But we do have a lot of deed restricted properties that are still in that price range. So I feel like we have a good spectrum. I would just caution when you're going down the road of looking at new deed restricted to safeguard against these higher levels, because at some point they do fall out of what would be considered right with $5-8. So, and actually Peak One was the private developer, so I don't know how much 5-8 funds was actually used in that. It's one of my questions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And that's a big thing to know is only 8% of the county's housing units are dedicated workforce housing. That's a small number. So when we've been building a lot and doing a lot, but it's still a small number compared to the whole. And the thing with Aspen, we looked at Aspen, they used to be about 10 years ahead of Summit County all the time with deed restriction. So we knew if something was hitting Aspen, we knew to see it about 10 years past that in Summit County. That gap has shrunk tremendously. We're seeing a lot of the same things that are going on in Aspen, but they have $2 million deed restricted properties. We know we have $1 million deed restricted properties, but we haven't crossed over the $2 million yet. But Aspen's situation is that their workforce workforce either lives in deed restricted or they income. The question is, are we there yet? And I think we are very, very close. So either they live outside of the county or they're living in deed restricted. Obviously, there's people that have been here for a long time, that are part of the workforce, that have owned their house for a while, and they still have a market rate property. But the turnover we're seeing with those homes is that they're not going to another person that works here locally. If they're market rate, they're usually going to a second homeowner or somebody that is wealthy and public.
In Keystone, it used to be condos like Flying Dutchman, Wild Irishman, Key Condo were all, a lot of the owners in there were in the workforce, and right now they're all priced out of those condos.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to your first point when you started talking about the appreciation caps. Appreciation caps didn't exist 20, 25 years ago. And it has created, in the units that didn't have those appreciation caps, it's really gone up. I mean, in Keystone, we have Hidden River Lodge, which has about a 6% appreciation cap, I think, on it.
I want to say 6, we just did one.
Yeah.
Keystone Town Council work session agenda, the Keystone.
So,
Only some of us.
oh, the ones that are deed restricted.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's
Those have been hard to
That's
sell.
an
too.
aberration. Again, they were built
Exactly.
25, 30 years ago.
And if we could have the magic wand to change deed restrictions, we would. There's no doubt about it. There's several neighborhoods like Hidden River Lodge, several developments that we would love to see a change in that. And it's interesting, we are way, as far as across the country with deed restrictions, Summit County is way advanced compared to a lot of the rest of the country. We've been doing this for a long time. Luckily, we had land banking way back when councils and in the county were buying property, buying land to use for, future things, and nobody really knew at the time what they were going to be used for, and now that we do know, because that's what they're being used for. So as much as it feels daunting that we're not doing enough, we've done so much in the last 20 years, especially in the last 10.
One of the largest number of complaints I get from folks who live in West Hills is the appreciation cap, because they've seen the market go up, shoot up tremendously, and they're at what, 2% cap, I think it is.
Yes, I think it
Yeah.
is.
So those are the challenges we have through working through.
And the question I usually pose back to that is, could they afford their property themselves if it was market rate? And usually the answer is no. It doesn't solve everything, I know that, and it kind of feels like it's shoving it back in their face, but there is a mentality of this, I should deserve more and I should be able to make more money off my property, and I understand that, but their friends wouldn't be able to buy their property, they wouldn't be able to buy their property, so we have to have some kind of a balance where we keep it affordable, or else we'll lose it. And we all want workforce housing so we can maintain our community, that's the biggest incentive. And if we lose them in that manner, we won't have people that live here that work in the community. This is our team. We're a team of 6. We have half our team came from property management, so we have a lot of background in housing. Vicki Lewis, I have put her front and center. She's been with the Housing Authority for 15 years. If any of you have interacted with someone with the Housing Authority, it's probably been with Vicki. She's seen every iteration of the Housing Authority. And then the rest are Jesse's been in there for a long time, and so has Sarah. I say long time, Summit County standard is 3 to 5 years. Danny James has been with us for 2 years, and I put myself at the bottom because I'm the newest with being with the group for just a year. I was with the Town of Breckenridge Housing Division for the 5 years prior to that. And then before that, I was in healthcare, so pulled all of it together to come to the Housing Authority.
Any questions?
Yeah. Well, speaking of pulling everything together, as you talk, I am just astounded by the breadth and the depth of knowledge, especially to your point about balancing. If you do this, this is going to be the impact. And I'm admiring what you're doing with that universal form. Is there a way that you'll be able to link some of those decisions on that universal form to and here are the pros and cons on the deed restriction, and here are the pros and cons on income caps or asset testing. Because I think they're all in your head. If we figured out how to get them out of your head and then share them.
Yeah, that's magic. You know, that's a great point. We actually just met with, the town of Frisco has been going through a long process of redeveloping, redesigning their standard town covenant. And so I've been at most of their council meetings and been part of their discussions as well. And it was a lot of that, pros and cons of what you do and how you do it. So that's a great idea. Once we've been going through piece by piece and developing those so that we can have that final document, but I think you're right, we absolutely need to say the pros and cons of each of those things that you could consider. So taking that slide that shows the covenant parameters that anyone should be considering and building those out in further detail to have kind of a roadmap to say, here you go, you have a new property, here's what all the things you need to talk about. It probably would have helped it on Frisco.
You didn't come here for me to suggest more work for you, but I think it would be very valuable. I was watching, I think it was Frisco's discussion, it was in the newspaper about, well, why can't we let people get a deed restricted home and yet, you know, build wealth? And that's to that balancing act you talk about. So anything you can do along those lines, we're kind of novices, so.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think, and I don't mind the more work. That's what we're here for. This year has been a great year of building, and now we've gotten to a really nice place, especially with our software program, that things are moving a lot more fluidly. So we've been able to take on other projects and other things like that will help the community, whether it's the community or town council, whoever's making those decisions. You're right, it's absolutely something that would be beneficial. Thank you. Yeah.
Other questions? John?
So, and I don't know intimately your balance sheet or and your finances, but it sounds like specifically with some of the programs, such as the down payment assistance program and the other loan program. I hope that's not what I sound like. And the other loan program, that there's a lot of money being expended right now, but then there's probably also a lot that you can anticipate seeing down the road, right? And I don't know what your repayment rate is, but that must be a good thing, right, for your financial operations and being able to support future programs down the road.
Yeah, and you know, we're quasi-governmental, so we run the same rules as you, so our budget is completely public. We did switch it last year where we looked at all of the expenses we were anticipating, and that's the amount we retained. The housing authority used to fluctuate with your sales tax, and now it's a fixed number every month. That's greatly helped. We did use our entire reserves really to buy the property that our office is now in, and so we spent, this year we have in our budget to build that back up just so we have some reserves. Because obviously the funding would come from all of the towns if we were to not have any money left. But with the summer revolving loan fund, yes, it is a revolving loan fund. So when we made that assessment to switch the program up to make it more beneficial, interest rates went up as well. So it became more beneficial overnight because it was cheaper money, right? We had about $800,000 in that account. So it was not being utilized. That is, we certainly want to keep money in that, but we also want it out in the community, because the more the money is out in the community, the more people are able to buy a property. That one is not tied to deed restriction. It's tied to workforce. They don't have to actually buy a deed restricted property to use it, and that's a good thing to know. But we are funded through 5A in the same way. The housing authority used to have more income sources because they used to do more in the real estate realm. So there was money coming back in outside of 5A. That is no longer. So the money, the income that the housing authority generates is pretty small, about $30,000 a year, which is with home buyer education and application costs for the loans and things like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? Corey, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Please feel free to come by our office. We love having you guys come visit and meet our team. We've had several council members from all over the county and board of county commissioners to come at different times. We would love to have you come see us, so please remember to stop by when you're in Frisco.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Next item is the update of the mountain energy project.
Okay, this will be short. You all got a memo from our attorney going into more detail on the mountain energy project. That's not what we're discussing today. I brought this up because, well, we have a PUC hearing tomorrow night at the Senior Center, Nancy's Place over in Frisco. I'll give just a real quick cap. This isn't so much for you if you read the memo as it is for people who might be listening interested. Excel Energy has proposed their mountain energy project to address perceived shortfalls in natural gas capacity along their mountain pipeline. This affects approximately 100,000 households. Grand County, Summit County, and there's a few other outlying places that it impacts. They're going to, Excel went to the PUC to propose this $155 million solution to address the model shortfalls. 48.7 million of that is statutorily required to be spent on what they call non-pipeline alternatives. I don't know if you remember when Blair was here from Excel talking, that would be things like incentives to local homeowners to move off of natural gas into electrification or other non-natural gas solutions. 78.6 million of that 155 million is proposed for the liquid and compressed natural gas facilities that they're proposing to build here in Summit County. Liquefied natural gas over towards Breckenridge, compressed natural gas somewhere between here and Dillon. An additional 28 million would be in electrical system distribution upgrades because they're trying to get people to electrify. There are a few concerns. One of the biggest concerns is there's a big push to limit on all other Excel and public service projects that happen in the state, large cap projects like this. The cost was distributed among all the ratepayers in the state. They are seriously considering limiting this $155 million cost to the 100,000 approximately ratepayers on the mountain energy project. So that's $1,500 a household that everyone who has Excel would be paying. Everyone who has Excel in our limited region would be paying.
One time?
What?
One time?
One time, but that cost was traditionally distributed among several million households.
But that wouldn't be a cost where you get a bill for $1,500. That would be buried into your rates that you pay.
Correct.
Over.
Yeah. And you know, they're hoping, well, there are lots of issues with this. That's why the town is intervening in this PUC decision. We'll be posting on the website how you can make your opinion heard. Since you as council members cannot make your opinion heard as council members, you already are as interveners, you can make them be heard as private citizens. And the first place to do it is tomorrow night, like I said, at the Senior Center. It is an official PUC hearing. each PUC case has just one, there are 3 PUC members. One is appointed the hearing officer. So we will just have one PUC member at Nancy's place tomorrow at 5:30 to 7 p.m. For in-person discussion. There will be a remote one on August 4th, 2 times during that day, and you can email and contact them at any time up until the decision is made. If you're listening and concerned about this, there are safety issues, there are cost issues, there are climate issues, there are equality of distribution of cost issues. So if you're interested, please show up at these meetings, even if you don't want to talk. We've been informed that presence at the meeting shows an interest in the community, and will go a very long way. Interestingly, Excel's scheduled their CML happy hour starting at 5 o'clock tomorrow night in Breckenridge. I'm sure it was a complete coincidence. The CML reception is directed at more than just us, but it was pretty interesting. And that's really all I had to say. We'll put all this information on our website for anyone. This can have a big impact on us in all sorts of ways up here, especially if you are a natural gas customer already or are planning on it. So, any questions?
Well, the $1,500, is that straight, everybody gets 15, or is it based on usage, on their current usage? So somebody has high electricity today, they pay $4,000.
I am unsure. This is still kind of in a proposed, it's not in their plan, but it's in some proposed changes.
In my experience in this state, I've never seen a one-time allocation out to people coming out on electric bills. It's normally buried in, and this would probably be buried in your natural gas prices.
Yeah, no, I recognize that. The question is really, is it prorated depending on the current
And
usage?
It would probably be used.
We don't know at this point. This is something PUC commissioners would work out if they accept this proposal to limit the cost over our limited base as
Where
opposed
does
to
the
state.
proposal come from, out of curiosity?
I probably can't go into that because it's probably attorney-client protected, but in some of the filings.
All right. Sure.
Thanks for the explanation. I understood that. Yay. What I don't understand is the action that Breckenridge recently took to okay something. Do you know what I'm talking about? I didn't know what was the relationship between that action and this, if any.
Well, Xcel has already had a temporary liquefied natural gas injection system. And Breckenridge okayed, it's under Breckenridge authority, it's within their jurisdiction. And they okayed the use for 1 more year. It's kind of a continue the status quo until decision is made on this.
So almost like interim rental. But isn't there one over on this side of between Keystone and Dillon? Isn't there any similar site?
There is not yet, but they are going to, the proposals to put in a compressed natural gas injection, which is significantly safer and cheaper than the liquefied natural gas injection station, but there's still a lot of safety issues. One of the big safety issues is when they're bringing in liquefied and compressed natural gas, whether it's going to Breckenridge or our site, it's
going to come over our
it's going to be driving right through.
Loveland Pass. Okay.
Any other questions about this one? We'll keep you.
how many trucks a day or a week?
We don't know yet.
I believe that they shared, because we asked this question, didn't they provide us a number during that presentation?
Not,
I remember the question, it was 3 to 4 a season, they said they could.
well, that's the liquefied natural gas, and that could change dramatically depending upon need.
But they would be having, the number of trucks would go up when we have a cold snap. I wouldn't expect any trucks to have to come through right now. But it's when they're using it, and they're going to use that injection, I believe, during the cold periods when they need the extra capacity.
Yeah, they would have some on the site, but it all depends on what the weather's like. A longer cold snap, they wouldn't have enough on the site, so they'd have to bring it in, and it's pretty hard to predict the weather.
Anything else, John? Any other questions?
I will give further updates as the intervention proceeds. We're not the only interveners on this. The state is intervening through their Consumer Utility Advocate Office, and a couple other groups that are intervening. So there's, regardless how you feel about natural gas, I'm very concerned about the cost sharing aspect of this that's coming.
Next item is animal control ordinance, John.
I can't believe we actually got to this.
2 other meetings, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so animal control ordinance. Let's just start going through it and see what concerns you as council members have so we can get something drafted. And we'll start at the beginning. The final sections of this dealing with quarantine issues and stuff like that are pretty straightforward and standard. I guess it's how do we want to treat, we're getting to the meat of it right away. What's an animal at large? How do we want to treat that? And what do you think? So and this is all proposal at this point, it's prohibited where they're not under physical restraint no longer than 8 feet in length, or an electronic control device, or which is under the effective and immediate control of the owner or other responsible person present with the animal and immediately obedient to that person's command. Voice control is the phrase used to describe that. So this allows animals to be at large under voice control. We've all seen that. I don't think I need to explain. Sometimes animals are really good at voice control. Sometimes owners are really blind to how bad their animal is at voice control. Let me see, obviously, if the animal's being held by the owner, they don't need to be on the leash. That's one exception we put in there, and the exceptions are very strange, or not considered to be running at large if they're in a motor vehicle, if they're in the back of a truck or something like that, and tied down so they can't get out. You leave your dog in the back of the truck, walk away, and he's not leashed in, that's not under effective control. I did put in paragraph B there, that all pet animals on paved public pathways or in plazas or other public areas intended for public gatherings shall be restrained by means of a leash or rope. Voice control is out the window. So if you're on our paved pathway, your animal must be on a leash. And I guess let's start from there. How do you guys feel about the voice control, and how do you feel about the limitations on voice control?
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I didn't have any problems with the first, I guess this won't kill me, but the part where we talked about paved walkways. Paved pathways. I agree in plazas, public areas, and then for public gatherings. I was just wondering if we needed that paved public pathways to be restricted as well.
Scares the hell out of me every time the dog is running loose and I'm on a paved path with bikes coming through on that path. And we have a lot, those paths are the ones that are heavily trafficked by tourists who don't understand as well. It can be dangerous. That's just my thought. That's the argument we had before. Aaron?
I mean, I've got two views. One that, yes, I agree. Also, it's absolutely terrifying to have a leashed animal, even on a 6-foot leash, decide to run across from their owner, and then you basically have a clothesline across the whole pathway. But I think all communities are consistent for the rec pathways because there's a rule made by open space that's consistent across all of the multi-use paths across the county to have a leash. And I think that comes from open space. So if we didn't do that on the multi-use pathways, we would be the exception. As far as outside of the rec pathways, on sidewalks and whatever, that's a separate discussion.
And this allows voice control outside of those. My only comment on this was, I believe we also ought to go beyond just the paved, but if they're onto a boardwalk, we have a lot of boardwalks that are down here that have paving going up to them, paving leaving them. I think they ought to be included in that same thing. In the center, I'm thinking of the center part of Keystone.
Across the wetlands,
Yeah.
not that much in the way of boardwalk there.
Oh, yeah, there is. When you come out of Mountain House, there's a whole long stretch of boardwalk going from there over towards River Run.
I just don't think it's that large of an area.
But I would hate to see it excluded, particularly in the future, if we would be looking at potentially putting more boardwalks through the wetlands. John?
Thanks. I'm by the mindset that this first explanation of control, right? And I think that what this is trying to get at is control, right? And if you can control your animal through voice commands, you need a physical leash or whatever, I'm personally by the mindset that whatever, like, the onus is on the owner, right? So if you can control them, you can meet that need, then that's okay with me. I really don't, when I read this, my first comment was public gatherings, right? Like, so are we just gonna start saying parks are now off limits to animals? Like, is that not for a public gathering, right? Is our public land not for public gatherings? So I'm really concerned with this, what I'm viewing honestly is an over restriction on it. I'm comfortable with as long as you can control your animal, right? And sure, we can talk about that. There's an instance where they might not be in control. We can also talk about how there's instances where they are in control, and we can have examples of both of those, right? But I don't like the idea of our community, which is super outdoors, tons of dog owners or pet owners. I don't like the idea of over-restricting.
But the only thing we're talking about restricting basically is the rec path.
But that's not what it says.
No, but the public gatherings, I think, what do you mean by public gatherings?
And I understand, it's not written correctly, it could be interpreted. My thought on that was really areas that are hosting public events. So, let's say, let's say the Plaza at River Run was a public, not owned by KNC, but was a public area or had, when they're holding events,
You should have a leash, yeah.
you should have a leash. And that was the intention. I understand how that's written.
That makes sense, but
Yeah.
all those large venues are private, whether it's Lakeside or River Run.
But there could be in the future venues though.
Yeah.
Just ask the question, what if we were having a community picnic
Right
in
here.
our parking lot, how'd you feel?
And that will be a public area in the near future.
I still am by, and I can definitely get on board with leashes required for certain areas, but I'm still by the mindset if you can control your animal in an appropriate method, we don't need to put it on a leash law. But again, I can get behind it. I don't want to have overly restrictive language for a community that is very recreational focused, and we have a lot of pets in our community.
But we're only talking, only pet, we're talking about basically the take of pet. Which is,
But does that mean now in the future, when we go to the, when we look at the north side of the highway path, is that going to be included in that?
It would be, it is. I just, as someone who, I had a dog who was much better off the leash than on the leash, significantly better off the leash than on the leash. But I always took a leash with me for two reasons. One, there are a lot of people who are just incredibly frightened of dogs and don't necessarily know that that dog's not going to leave my side at any time. And even the best controlled dog, can be set off by a rabbit running right in front of them, by another owner who is also doesn't have their dog under leash control, but doesn't have them under voice control, runs up and starts interacting with your dog who is under voice control. Your dog will quickly be out of voice control. It's a tough situation. We're a dog community. We're a trail outdoor recreation community. I don't want to take my dog on a hike and not let him run and get the exercise. I mean, I can't keep up with my dog, and my dog can't get the right amount of exercise if he's walking at my pace. So it is questionable, but I guess in this case I absolutely agree we need to change it. And Plaza's public area is intended for public gatherings. While a public event is being held, I think would go a long way on that, but it's up to you, but paved pathways are busy, and when we have the pathways along Highway 6, they're going to be busy right next to a major highway too.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I'm still by the mindset that you know your dog the best, right? So if you have a dog that you know needs to be under leash control next to the highway, put it on a leash, right? Like, and I'm like that with my dog, right? Like, if I know I'm going near a highway, no, put it on a leash. But if I know I'm going to a very desolate area, might not, right? And so I think it really, the libertarian side of me is coming out that I think we need to be a little bit more trusting in our community to do what's right for their own situation.
The negative side of that is, you think back to the trail runner who had a dog charge at her and was hospitalized for weeks. And so all we're talking about is the paved pathways. Everything else can be off leash and under control.
We did have a dog attack cat on our pathways just recently.
So,
And not everyone's like you.
okay. So what if it was, Because again, I'm getting caught up on, we're talking a lot about expansion for our community recreational options, right? And I presume just a lot of those, or at least a significant portion of them, would be paved, right? So maybe not, yeah, but a portion of them, I guess, at least will. So do we have a different designation for like our multi-use paths versus our bike paths versus like, where are we envisioning? Because I kind of do agree with the sense that bike paths, right, where there's going to be a heavy presence of that, would be more appropriate to have this kind of restriction. But I almost disagree for areas that have like a bunch of stairs or like aren't designated for like bikes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't see it just as a bike issue. If bikes are a key piece of it, in fact, pedestrian bikes are potentially even a safety issue. As we saw during the RTAP survey, the recommendations that came out of that. But there are people who are deathly afraid of dogs. And a dog off the leash is scary to them.
So
very scary.
We're talking about all paved rec paths.
For right now. And if it becomes a problem, change it.
Sure.
Can we define what we're talking about? The paved rec path, nobody seems to be arguing that. Am I?
Yes, he is.
Okay, well, come back to that. And then, a US highway that doesn't, sidewalk that does not yet exist, that you would anticipate that would be.
That would be
Anything else? For instance, there's a lot of areas in Keystone that have no sidewalk, and dogs use the road as their walkers do. Are you thinking that that's considered a paved pathway?
No.
Okay,
No.
clarify.
Those would be subject to the voice control or
Okay.
leash control.
Related to all that, my concern is that we do have a lot of turnover between second homeowners. We have a lot of turnover of full-time residents. Are we going to post on those places so it's not a surprise and everyone has the same information?
We're not doing anything new. It's always, you've always had that leash on the right path. That's
How do people know that?
by whatever means county and open spaces previously used to try and inform them. If you're asking if we should do something else, I don't know.
Usually they know it the first time they have a dog who's causing a minor problem on the path and someone says we have a leash law. We'll post.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about. I just don't want people to be surprised. And that is a way to say, if it's important enough for us to invest in a few signs, then it's important. And it also makes us think twice about each public pathway that we choose.
And I'll be honest, there are pathways that will be on this that I don't expect we will ever ticket someone for letting the dog run free. For instance, the pathway on the north side of Montezuma leading up to Power Line Lot, it would be under this. I don't ever see us going and ticketing the only person on that pathway and their dog.
Because that's what I do.
Yeah.
I'm that person.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going.
But if your dog were off leash and got involved with an altercation with another dog or someone else, that gives added leverage for the sheriff or the police department, animal control, and makes it even tougher for you when you face your first lawsuit.
And I want to make a point, I'm not going to die on that hill.
Yeah.
Or that pathway. But it is one of the, it is, that one specifically is one I walk often. It's not used that often, and we let our dog off.
Now, even the bikers don't use it, they stand on the road.
So it seems like we're talking about creating a law that we know is going to be broken and that is not going to be supportive of our community.
No. Every law we create, we assume is going to be broken at some point or another. That's just the way people are.
So as a compromise, though, I say that as a compromise, what if we looked into designating paved walkways and pathways in the core downtown where they would be more likely to be trafficked and heavily used rather than areas that are less used but would still technically fall under that?
What's downtown?
Well, that would be a really good project to assign staff or look at. But in all seriousness, right, I think that there's a difference between like the core area where there will be a higher percentage of folks using those bike paths than say out of the branch where there's going to be, and they probably have their own. But that's what I'm saying is a more desolate area of town where there could possibly be a backyard opportunity.
How about, could we just say we're posted?
That's what I was proposing.
Okay, can we?
Because we've decided that that is a choice.
No, because that would, going right back to your statement, how do these second homeowners know? They're going to be second homeowners accessing this pathway that will not see the sign. And we can't put a sign every 40 feet down the pathway saying leash laws. And we don't want to have, we would rather have an understandable and enforceable rule and let our police department make the judgment call than to have a very confusing rule that people can't figure out where it's applicable.
So what if it is a compromise then, we start to look at what the reasoning for this is, and this is really when other people are present. And so could we change the verbiage to include sufficient physical control when there's a likely possibility of running into other people on the path?
And what's a likely possibility? The person right around the corner coming with their group of 6 people on a bike?
In May, you're going to be a lot less likely to run into people than they do.
But it comes down to, again, as we've talked on other ordinances, the discretion and the trust in the folks who are enforcing this to be able to exert their own judgment of whether there was really a risk there or not.
And that's what I'm trying to get at with this.
We don't have to put that in the words, because that's in essence is how it's handled today.
I don't think we're looking to have dog catchers out looking more at water controls. But it, I suppose, is set up for situations where you have irresponsible management or control, right?
It's kind of like our speeding laws. It will be the rare situation where a police officer gives you a ticket for doing 5 miles over the speed. But they can, and that's in their pocket, and we rely on their discretion, and actually at this point we all understand that discretion. There's a big difference between your chance of getting pulled over 5 over and 20 miles an hour over. Same way here, there's a lot bigger chance you're going to get pulled over with your dog off the leash if there are a lot of people and it's causing a problem than if it's standing and stop.
And the police are only going to be responding to this when there's a complaint.
Just wanted to, I brought this up originally, and I've seen pros and cons, and I actually be okay with the way it's written right now, at least this part. There are other issues that we'll get to.
Okay.
I think first I want to also acknowledge the idea of police aggression. Some dogs do much better off leash. And then there's a certain amount of like, it's your pet that's relying on you. If you're going to take a risk going off leash next to the highway, you know your dog, you take that risk. But overall, I find this version written less restrictively than previous drafts, because I did stare very, very closely at this particular proposal since I think we've been looking at this for a long time. It's just been down agenda. So I do want to say that I appreciate the measured approach here. And I think after hearing some discussion, I also understand John's point about not getting aggressive with signage that can set us up to fail. Those were what came to mind.
And to be fair, my question about how do people know, we can address that in a great way by having that added to the required paperwork that SDRs have in their units. That, just so you know, in this town, the law is X, Y, Z.
And I figure we'll post it on, a good place to post it is on all the dog bed stations, and put up more something like that.
I think people use those.
They use them and then they leave the bags with the dog food buried in content. There is no difference.
So I'm reading the room, right, and I understand the public pathway sentiment, right? And I'm asking, because we had previously talked about this, is there still a possibility of rewriting this slightly to address the concern about places or public areas used for public gatherings when the public gathering is occurring?
And actually when special events are happening, make it very clear that it's during events, not. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
So do I have a thumbs up on the basic wording that's here and the sentiment of what's here and clarification of special event versus just public gatherings? All right. Next, John.
Okay, let's get to C, and
I do have a question back to, and I'm sorry, I have a question back to A, which is the kind of section we were just talking about.
yeah,
Unrelated, right? Am I reading this correctly that there is no exception for a animal inside a fenced yard or on a longer leashed cable run? I read it a couple times and I didn't read that, but if I'm missing it, please let me know.
you know what, I will certainly write something, I will make that clear, that shouldn't raise a question.
And you should also make clear that when you talk about electronic device control, I interpret that to be electronic fences to keep the dog in.
See, I read that as an electronic collar.
Like a shock collar too. I think both fall under that.
Would fall under that because once the dog's trained, the dogs don't normally exit that yard. But if the dog did exit the yard, then the person would be in violation. As long as they were maintained in the yard, they're not.
Because they're not under electronic control if they've exited.
Right.
Yep.
Is the sentiment for the group that a fenced yard and longer cable run would be okay or not? Is that?
As long as they're
And I'll make that-
within the boundaries of the yard.
Thank you.
Dog is where it's allowed to be.
Yeah.
And then if the dog barks a lot, then you fall under the other portion.
Exactly.
So let's get to that other portion. Yapping dog. Any questions?
Oh, I have a question on F. I don't understand F. In that portion, no person shall be charged with a violation of this section unless a written warning for a separate violation has been given at least 24 hours. So that would imply that,
I need to redo that. I don't know that. Yeah.
So what I read that as, and I don't know the intent, but what I read this as, especially for the animal feces, right, is we come, and this is exactly what we were talking about before, basically changing behavior, right? If we come and say, hey, your animal has left a lot of feces here, you need to remove it, and then I don't, then the next day, 24 hours later, you can come back and get a fine for that, is what I read that as.
Yeah, and that's what I put in, but it covers the entire
Yeah, I read
section.
it as you get one freebie.
Yeah, and you shouldn't always get one.
No.
No, I think that should be officer discretion.
Yeah, yeah,
I agree.
yeah, I agree too. That's why we workshop these. So, but back up to C, yapping dogs.
So then what happens if the officer decides that they're in violation of C?
They get a citation.
Okay.
But is everyone okay with it? Okay, D, I'm gonna have to add the word excess accumulation. We don't want people complaining because there's a couple dog poops in their backyard from their
I wasn't gonna die on that hill, but I agree.
And the next one is basically the pickup after your dog thing and don't shovel your poop in your neighbor's yard.
This is just in picking up in your car.
Where am I?
On E. We don't really have.
Okay, yes.
We don't have a rule to pick up dog poop. Right.
No, but we need to have that in there. That can take the place of F.
Not saying from you, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question, really. We don't, it's not in there anywhere.
What should we add?
Oh, yeah.
I think it should be happening, but I'm concerned about over legislating. But
We would probably
Well,
never.
we're legislating whether the owner is gonna pick it up in their own barn, but not whether they're gonna
my
pick it up
previous
on the
statement
street.
still stands.
Yeah.
Okay.
What this basically lays out as an expectation.
But I think we need that to be, you need to pick up after your dog anywhere not in your yard too. Yeah, the way this is written, if I train my dog to poop in my neighbor's yard, I'd be.
Although, maybe they'd have to be on a leash or.
Under hoisting down an 8-foot leash, I can go stand
You're
on the
the
side.
You go over there.
Is there, I mean, I brought this up, but is there an issue of, if it's off in the woods?
Those need to be picked up too.
Up on the mountain?
Those need to be
Yeah,
picked
that's
up too.
wildlife.
Dan, I was thinking about the same thing.
Those,
It's one of those things, is an officer gonna go into the middle of the woods and check if the defecation was.
but besides that, our police wouldn't have, they wouldn't have jurisdiction up in the woods anyway.
They, in some of our roads.
Yeah,
Just,
our roads, absolutely, they up in the trails up on the mountain.
But you should anyways, because if you generally go in the woods on set pathways, up on the mountain, up set pathways, where other people go to recreate too.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
On that note, I'm glad that we're getting some facilities at Keystone Coach, because there's some humans who don't pick up after themselves there.
But there's a bear in the woods.
Thanks, Ben.
I think there's some plans for like trailhead improvements.
By the county?
I think by the Forest Service.
Oh, wow.
We'll see if it still happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gotten through the ugly parts. We can go licensing.
Can I ask a question that I think just should be clarified? So the ordinance talks about pet animal, but all of you have been commenting about dogs. I think we should define pet animal in terms of what that means.
That's a good point.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, I could have a pet fox and then,
Sure.
like, and in theory, right, that would be okay to defecate in the woods near the path, but
Well, somebody could argue that that's a pet, and so it has to comply with all of these rules.
More to the point maybe is people's interest in raising chickens in their backyards.
Well, I guess what my question is are these rules limited to dogs, which is what all of you have been referring to, and if that's the case, then we should just use the term dogs.
I did play golf with an individual that was right here living that day. So just FYI.
But then throwing devil's advocacy here, and I grew up with a very outdoors cat, right? And that cat was a pet. I can tell you it was not confined to our yard. It would leave itself wherever it would like to while I was out exploring the field in the back behind our house. But as this is written to our attorney's point, that would be a significant violation of anything. Like, I know pet outdoor cats are a lot less frequent out here due to the natural, natural occurrences. But I think that that's a very valid point.
Yeah, and they don't last long typically, but I have seen outdoor cat that has managed to survive a very long time out here. And slightly more, cats often will vary their feces, but they kill a lot of birds.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing.
Yeah, I've seen my neighbor's cat in my yard stuck in bluebird and really upset me with my neighbor for letting the cat be an outdoor cat in my yard.
So what is the suggestion?
So do we limit this to dogs or do we keep it all pet
I think we
animals?
keep pets.
Yeah.
Leashes for Burmese pythons?
Well, how about your iguana? I've seen people walking their iguanas on leashes.
But I guess the question comes down to, do we want to, in theory, make it legal for there to be outdoor cats?
The bird lover in me says absolutely, but is anyone else doing that? And I have a cat, by the way, that I love very much.
Birds are smart.
What again this does, the way it's worded, it gives flexibility. If there is a particular problem, it's helpful. And as you already pointed out, with cats, their half-life out here, unless they happen to be a cat like I had when I was growing up. It was, yeah, Max.
Oh, Max.
Is pretty small. The foxes are still not necessarily fat like used to. That's what I saw this morning. Shall we leave it as pets and that just gives flexibility?
I would just address
Define.
the definition,
Yes.
yeah, because I've experienced that in other communities where then you have an argument between neighbors as to what's a pet animal and what's not.
Do we, and I,
Does it have a name? It's a pet.
I'm looking at it. So, and I've seen like pictures and it's like charts where it's like where it's legal to have like a monkey as a pet or something, right? Do we have any legal concern or we need to define types of animals that you're allowed to have as a pet?
I think that there are some state laws related to types of animals that you can have.
So would we be okay to just say like any animal is defined by the state that is determined as a pet, or how would we define this?
Well, I can work with John and put a definition together. I mean, there's pretty common pet animal definitions. And maybe we have something in the land use code.
We do. Is there something from the county saying like the following things have to be licensed? Because we require a pet license from the county.
Yeah,
Dogs and cats.
I would, right, I
Or
would
dogs.
imagine that. Mhm.
Well, the current thing says all dogs are required.
Yeah, dogs have to be licensed,
So cats don't need that.
but they have to have rabies shots, I believe.
Yeah, yes.
Again, I want to bring up chickens. It's been very controversial in some communities in the United States, especially if they have a rooster. I wouldn't have chickens in my backyard. They wouldn't last long, but it's a possibility. Do we need to address that, or do you find that unnecessary?
I think HOAs would regulate that. I mean, there's just about nowhere there isn't, but I'd sure be fine with banning roosters.
I agree with the concern, and if it's not a concern now, I don't think,
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that, please.
Okay, you were going to licensing?
Yeah.
Licenses.
Just,
How, I mean, all of our visitors, and they all have to go get a Summit County animal license for their dogs?
It's written that way, isn't it?
it is written that way. I think I have,
Summit County requires 3 weeks.
yeah.
But
I'll
my
explain.
dog is licensed back home in Texas, how'd that work?
Let me,
Good.
hang on a second.
But what if your town doesn't have a license?
Now, I had language about that relating to something else I thought in here.
I think it was about the rabies being, regulations of another state, city, or town. It's the bottom of section 5A.
Yeah.
You know, since we're using the common animal control with the county, and the licensing is the common licensing with the county, personally, I think we ought to have the same rules that the county is dealing with.
Is that 48 hours for the rabies a common in the license, or that was a question I had? What does that come into play for? Is that dog sitting for more than 24 hours or 48 hours?
Where are you dealing?
Top of A, section 5. But I presume that, to your point about this being a common, not copy and paste, but a common approach, I was wondering where that 48 hours came from. If it was
Yeah, it came from trying to maintain consistency with the Dillon laws on the rabies control and vaccination.
I'm just confused on what it's trying to get at.
It's saying, get your animal,
Within 2 days, basically?
that,
No, it means that if you own a dog, it has to be vaccinated. If your sister comes to visit for more than 48 hours, her cat or whatever needs to be vaccinated.
Okay, so that's basically saying my sister's coming from Wyoming and they don't have a rabies law there and they don't believe in vaccinations or something. They're coming for a week, I would have to get it vaccinated.
yeah.
Yeah, okay,
The 48 hours refers to how long it's here.
gotcha.
But I agree that we should take that language from the bottom of 5A to add to licenses too. Like, you don't have a Summit County license, but you're licensed
Yep.
somewhere else or.
Unless it's 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'd recommend you look what the county has,
Yeah,
and then use what the county has.
I don't like that.
But,
Yeah, I have too many people I know that come up for, you know, a month, 2 months. Their dog is licensed elsewhere. And so I just think that I don't like that.
I think if you have a valid license, you
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
valid license.
yeah, that's what I'm talking. If you have a valid license somewhere else, then
But that's not what it is.
well, as I read the county stuff, I was trying to figure out what is Dillon, what is Silverthorne, and the rest do. And they very much mirror the county, but when you read the licensing piece for the county, what it focuses on is basically ID. So when you license your dog with the county, you pick up, you're participating in a national ID program so that if your dog is lost, you can be identified. So that's what it appears the county is really doing with the licensing program.
But we're looking to make sure they're vaccinated.
yeah.
I think most towns do participate in that, and I don't know if we want to
Yeah, this,
disadvantage somebody who comes from a little town that doesn't.
the licensing was actually the last thing I added to this, kind of as a win. And I'm not sold on it myself that we should have that requirement.
I would ask you to talk to the animal control people and why. And I think that if you read the animal control stuff, it's all driven around making sure that that dog or cat or whoever's required to have the license is in the national database. So when that dog is picked up running loose, they have a point of contact to be able to get a hold of an owner versus to come and pick up the dog versus the dog sitting in the pound and then getting euthanized.
So why don't we just have that be expectation here is that they're part of the national database? Because what I'm viewing this as, like, without that context, without that public context, I'm viewing this as some county wants 21 election earlier. If the real goal is to have the dog identifiable, we should call it out.
Yeah, but you could, that's why I suggested going to the county regs, because the county makes that really clear.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm not sure what we're saying. What we agreed to.
So I'm the one who reached out to John and said we should probably identify the fact that if you're in Summit County requires licensing and vaccination. If it's not our rule, maybe we don't even need to call it out.
But it is our rule. We could choose not to require licensing. But the question is, because we use Summit County Animal Control, we want to be in consistency with everyone else. But I was very interested in what do the other towns do on this one.
And they all require the Summit County license.
Yeah.
I disagree with that, but.
A point of information, like the shelter, it's not that they never euthanize, but they're not going to euthanize an animal because no one's picked it up in 2 weeks. They euthanize because it's like vicious or has a terminal disease. So I just want to make that.
But they have the right to euthanize.
True.
And if no one comes to adopt it, do they have a point at some point where they can make that choice?
I've seen dogs that are wild.
They
I don't think they're
for a long time. And also, I mean, you have a situation where like the owner lost their dog in Summit County and to be called for 9 months or 2 years. Then it didn't get adopted. But I just want to add the vaccine thing. The reason that is so stringent is multifold. For those not familiar with rabies, the survival rate for rabies is 0. Hard stop. And it is a bit of a rush and quite an expense to have to get both a rabies shot and the immunoglobulin treatment is quite expensive. And that's something that you may have to do depending on the situation where you are hit by an animal that has not been vaccinated. And so I think it's quite reasonable to have that requirement. Even if you come from some place that doesn't, I don't care. You would be imposing that risk upon the local operators.
Are you talking, and I just want clarification, are you talking about rabies vaccination or the licensing requirement?
The rabies.
Yeah.
Oh, rabies.
Can I clarify something?
They're separate.
They're actually related.
Licensing.
Let me share what Summit County actually says. And there they say that all dogs in unincorporated Summit County and the towns of Blue River, Dillon, Keystone, and Silverthorne are required to wear a current license tag. Cat licenses are voluntary. The licenses ensure that pets are vaccinated against rabies because proof of rabies vaccination is required to get the license. It then also says, oh, by the way, it may keep your dog from an unnecessary trip to the animal shelter, and it may provide a way to locate you. Those are added as additional reasons for any owner to want it. But they don't specifically call out that it needs to be a Summit County license.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, yeah, that would make it real easy. All dogs are required to have a officially government issued.
Or just use the Summit County license.
Yeah.
Wait, so I'm confused, I'm sorry. Are we in support of requiring a license for everything, or not?
I think we're in support of following the Summit County rule.
Yeah, we're using the Summit County language, and Summit County language doesn't say a Summit County license, but they have to have a license.
Okay, so every dog has to have a license. It could be Summit County, it could not be.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I would use their exact language.
Yeah, because the rationale is the license turns out to also be rabies vaccination. And you're off the hook on your.
First I identify as a Jewish man.
I was looking for that too.
Sure.
So I'll bring this back with the hearing in Summit County. Does anyone have any issues with the rabies control or the reporting of bites, impoundment of animals?
And that's That's all that follows the county then, correct?
Follows,
Question on section, on D, or section 5 on page 5,
yep,
where it talks about, do we necessarily want the town clerk, that last sentence, the owner of the animal shall also within 5 days of loss or destruction of the original tag report in writing such events to the town clerk and to the agency responsible for the issuance of the original tag. Is that really necessary?
no.
Good call.
For all these areas, John, why don't you look what the county has?
And then going down to section E, the proof, I was a little, wasn't quite sure if it's saying that you should be carrying your vaccination record on you, because it talks about on demand, when police officer, animal control officer, or other person. It kind of sounds like you need to provide that proof.
Could we change that to furnish for 24 hours or something?
Right.
I mean, most local laws are going to require proof, and the way that's generally done is you get a rabies tag that gets updated, and you just put that on with their little tag that your dog should be wearing it anyway, that has its license.
I feel like the dog whisperer. So this kind of suggests that if you're dog sitting a dog for any length of time, if you are running a kennel and anybody comes to check, you have to be able to furnish not only your dogs that you have nicely put the tag on, but maybe one of the dogs you're dog sitting doesn't have the tag, still have to be able to furnish proof.
And, once again, obviously, no officer, if he goes, can you give me proof that this dog has a rabies tag while you're walking down the pathway, he's going to issue a ticket, well, I have to go home and go through my files to get there.
And the reason that you need immediate proof is when you're deciding at the hospital what to do for someone who's been bit, having that proof is important. And not waiting is important. Even my cat gets little metal tags that put on the collar it doesn't have because it's not an outside cat. But it still gets its rabies.
You just hang the collar up with the
But yeah, we'll get the town clerk out of that loop.
And again, that goes back to probably the reason that they, as Carol pointed out, and she put the language, one of the reasons for the license was verification of security before that the dog's supposed to have that license on them. Have that proof.
And not all states may necessarily require. But they will get the rabies, a little tag, not a big tag.
Yeah. We've always had it.
Okay. Any things with quarantine and time reporting flights?
Yes. I didn't see it in here, and I might have just missed it. I know that there was a section here about disposal of animals, making any euthanized animal under the supervision, blah, 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 blah. But that was licensed and vaccinated animals. Is there an area here where we call out the right or ability for us or our designated right, an animal control officer, to dispose of an animal that has been part of a bite or a death or something of serious nature that would dictate the euthanasia?
A vicious dog.
Is there, and I'm not joking, my town back home is currently going through a very serious lawsuit about this because they didn't have this. So this is why I'm very concerned, is that I want to make sure we basically give ourselves the right to kill an animal if we need to. For lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, we can get language like that in there. And that's, yeah.
You're being the business.
I don't know if it covers that, right?
I'll make sure, and if not, I'll make it clear.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, you know, if your dog is
Yeah.
5 kids on 5 separate occasions, guess what? Any other? Are we okay if well, I guess we can workshop it. I'll make those changes, but I'll put down the workshop and for first reading, same.
Happy workshop, or do you want to bring it back to, I guess bring it back to workshop because there's significant changes.
Yeah, but not a whole,
It
shouldn't take long, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then first reading, you're happy with first reading, but on the regular agenda?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we've been doing.
Good call.
Could we get a copy of it a little earlier? That way we could just kind of proof it, and if there is something significant, we got this from discussion. That way we don't have to do it with amendments the first reading.
I'll do my damnedest. I'm kind of busy for the rest of this week.
If we could move it off 2 weeks, and then you can get it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a, 9 days from now going out with the next packet.
Why don't we just put it back on the workshop agenda then, that way? It'll give us some time.
Well, look, the changes we're making are, we're going to include fenced or dog runs. We're going to add boardwalks to paved areas. We're going to call out during events. We're going to add the word excess to dog poop in your yard, feces in your yard. We're going to remove all of section F, but add that you have to pick up dog poop in public. We're going to mirror the Summit County language on licensing, and we're going to remove the clerk, and then we're going to have language which is probably pretty standard on vicious dogs.
Yeah, and then when we get that, we can always, in first reading, choose not to approve it in first reading, send it back.
That's just a lot of changes, and I'm more concerned about the language mirroring Summit County, and that being really kind of new to us. So I'm okay to talk about it in the council meeting, and just, done that.
Yeah.
I mean, we tend to spend an excessive amount of time wordsmithing, you know, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 changes, only 2 things you haven't seen the language on, basically. One of them is the licensing requirement, which we heard tonight, and the other would be the vicious dogs section. So it's not, I don't want to just keep.
I think by discussing it in the first reading is not the
I
option.
think that's the consensus.
Sort of reserve the right to think of something else.
Yeah, we can always,
Yeah, we can always continue.
yeah, just because it's on the main agenda doesn't mean it shouldn't mean it has to be passed.
Correct.
All right, it's now 6:31. I would propose that we adjourn the work session, and we will just defer the items on the bottom of the list, which is Lynn's favorite, unless you would like to have that discussion now, because I know it impacts the company.
There's still time.
All right.
Are you sure?
So that they would defer density, town financials, and the update again.
Any concerns about town financials? And we're gonna, next meeting is gonna be a whole lot of financials and budgets.
There were questions, but nothing important.
Good idea, we'll do back in.
So, without objection, the work session is adjourned.